You are listening to the Practicing the Art of Small Business podcast with Shannyn Merlo and Julie Parker. Enjoy this conversation about business, leadership, and the self-awareness journey to great success.
Welcome, Julie, and welcome, listeners, to Practicing the Art of Small Business. Julie, episode number 44, legs 44.
It's actually legs 11.
What is, as I was saying it, I was like, what does a 4 look like? It's like a bended thing.
It's like two flamingos because it's like a bended flamingo
yeah. Two fluffy flamingos.
Flamingo. And you're dressed like a flamingo in your pink colour, lovely.
Hence my reference. I'm also standing on one leg, so...
That's hilarious. I love it. What are we talking about today, Shannyn? I don't know why I'm asking you because I raised the topic.
Well, accordingly, Julie, it turns out you want to change me and you want to find out how. Probably because I was quite late to our meeting, and so you want to try and project onto me some changes without actually having a direct conversation with me. That's all I'm making the story about.
Aggressive that would be with me, but it's more upfront than that. It's more upfront than that. I had a lovely conversation with a client a few days ago, and it's not the first time I have received this question. I'm sure you've received this question yourself over the years of how can I motivate my team members to want to learn? And when they say want to learn, more about the job and more about customer service, more about the things that they do within the business itself.
Yeah, in addition, I had a client who has a team member who's not behaving in the way that we want them to behave, not aligned with how the organisation is operating. And the business owner is asking the question, like, how do I make them change? So I guess the idea around can you get someone to be motivated to learn is a similar question to can I make someone change their behaviours because I want them to do it differently. And it's probably a big question of can you make someone change? I mean, that's a big question to ask. That's a big question to start off with, I think.
Yeah, because we've gone through do we have the right to force people to do the things that we want them to do in a past episode?
Yes.
And got, free will. That was the episode on free will. But even if what we truly want as managers, as owners of businesses is to encourage or create the environment for people to do the things in the way that we would like to do them, but for them to want to do them too. It reminds me of that classic, couples problem. I want you to ask me out to dinner more often. I want you to bring me flowers more often, but I don't want you to need me to ask you to do it. I want you to just know to do these things. The same is true, though, isn't it, with employers and employees or managers and team members. I don't want to have to make you do them. I wish you would love to do these things yourself.
And also, I don't want to tell you, I want you to mind read and just work it out that this is what I want. There's a lot of business owners, I'm sure, who are just like, there was like a little guilty kind of in the stomach when I said that, because I think a lot of business owners, certainly the ones that I've worked with, when they've been challenged with team members who haven't changed, most of the time when I say, have you had that conversation with them? They've kind of gone, not yet. It's like, what are they supposed to do? Change by osmosis? Just pick up on your emotional vibes? No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's right. And I think too, when I first got asked the question, how can I motivate my team member to want to learn? I said, well, you can't force someone to want to learn. That's up to them. People either like to learn or they don't like to learn. However, you quizzed me on that a little bit, and I agree with you. I think that sometimes we are not providing an environment that's conducive to someone to want to learn in. And so you can't force someone to learn in your environment if every time they make a mistake, then a ton of bricks comes down on them. or every time they want to have added resources or training or cost of time, energy, money to learn how to do the thing better or to do anything better, that they come up with a lot of resistance around that. So it's a two-way street, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, and learning's an interesting example. And maybe if we just stay on the learning bit for a moment, because I think, can you make someone change? Well, going back to your relationship example, I think most people who have been in a relationship would know that you can't change someone else. You can't change
It doesn't stop
someone.
people from
And
trying to year upon decade.
yeah, but I haven't successfully done it. Yeah, yeah. So I think using the learning as an example is a good one. So maybe if we just stay on this one as a example, an example of an example of an example.
It's late in the day, people. Shannon's a little bit tired.
I've run out of my words.
Well, let's have a think about that. People who love learning, and with me and my club members, I have all my lunch and learns. And somebody messaged me just yesterday. It was hilarious. She says, "I love eating lunch and I love learning." And I said, that is awesome. I'm going to start using that in my promotions. Do you love lunch? Do you love learning?
Do you love learning?
And then she later on messaged me, I also love drinking and I love to sleep.
You need to have an ascension program of drink and learn and sleep and learn.
I said, we've got so much in common. So, but if people who love to learn, let's imagine someone who loves learning. Why do they love learning? Because there will be an intrinsic driver at play there that we all would quite naturally have by ourselves. So that will then lead us possibly down the path of identifying the barriers that are stopping that natural drive of loving to learn and trying to figure out what kind of environment do we need to create. So the people that love learning, I think they've already experienced what it feels like to progress, to start doing things differently and adopting new things, new ways of doing things in their life, and they've enjoyed the success of that, the feeling of progress with that, the more enjoyable outcomes of that, and that then helps motivate them moving on and learning more.
Interesting. What keeps coming up for me is that growth mindset. Does someone who loves learning intrinsically have a growth mindset? As I say that, I'm going to say no, because I think there's certainly been times where I've not had a growth mindset, but I love learning. I love learning new things. I love when a client asks me a question and I have no idea what the answer is and I've got to go on a bit of a Google. And in fact, I got in trouble by my best friend and her son, actually, as it turns out. And I might just do a little segue around this conversation. She listens to the podcast, so you know who you are, my darling. I love you to death. But every time not every time, but she would say something and I'd be like, oh, and I'd hop on my phone and do a bit more research. And she's like, why don't you just accept what I say? And I'm like,
because I don't believe
hang on. But actually it was like, no, you've just given me the starting point. I want to learn more. I want to have a bigger understanding of the context of this. But she was a little bit offended that I wasn't taking on board. And she's like, literally everything I say, you have to research it. And I'm like, yeah, and so maybe it is that I don't believe her. No, it is that I do believe her, but I also love to put more context on what I'm learning, but I haven't always had a growth mindset. And I think it's the context of the learning as well. So I love learning on the fly. I love getting small chunks of information that I can go down a rabbit warren with. Like, for example, international Day of Women's International Day. Oh gosh, I should get the day correct, is next week. And I was doing a social media post for that. And I won't go into the long story because it's much longer than this little story I'm going to give you. But I started researching Edith Cohen because she had an amazing quote. And I am going to read the quote because it's an amazing quote. Hang on, bear with me. Women are very desirous of their being placed on absolutely equal terms with men. We ask for nothing more nor less than that. Now, that was in the 1920s. I don't know the exact date of that quote. But then I was like, wow, that's a great quote. Who is Edith Cowan, really? And I was like, oh, she's Australian. Oh, yes, Edith Cowan University. Then I went on. She was the first woman who was voted into politics in Australia. And she was a suffragette. So she was really passionate about women's rights because she saw how women who were not educated had a much harder time at being successful generally in life and were often left with a much harder deal, and how prostitutes were, again, health outcomes, mental health outcomes, social outcomes were really, really poor. So I'm going down this rabbit hole researching Edith Cohen. I'm like fascinated. I was like, that's amazing. But if you had have said to me, you need to research an Australian female, change agent, I'd be like, really?
Yeah.
So I think it's all around context.
I agree with you because one, you're forced into doing some work. But the other way is you're just finding life interesting. You're finding the world interesting. And I think that's part of it too. When we're going through, Borders and through all the books and readings and we're going through all the titles, how many...
Did you say Borders?
Borders, that was an old bookstore.
Oh, honey, you're living in the past a little bit.
I am 87 years old after all.
I don't want to point out your age, but you've just done it. Do you still get your videos from Blockbuster?
I still know where the old Blockbusters used to be. Why for the old
She's still got a video card, a membership card. She's kept it just in case.
But I think that's one driver behind loving to learn, because I just find everything so interesting. Why wouldn't you want to go down the rabbit holes? Because everything is so interesting. And so we've got people that are driven by desire to progress and become better. And Daniel Pink in his book Drive identified one of our drivers that motivates us intrinsically to move forward or to do anything, not just move forward, but do anything, is mastery. We've all got an internal desire to want to get better, to get to master the things that we do out of interest, in case you're interested in the other ones. The other two are purpose. We are driven by purpose, and we are also driven by autonomy. We don't like being told what to do. We like to be in command of what we do every day. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose are the three main drivers that Daniel Pink identified in his book Drive. And so it's out of just wonderment and interest in the world around us. It's out of our desire to progress, out of our desire to develop mastery. And so then we think, okay, well, what smothers people's desire to learn? If we're intrinsically driven, actually, and by survival, we need to learn, and so it's an internal driver, what smothers that? And one of those things is because there's an emotional cost to bear when I do try to learn something new.
Well, I wonder whether it goes back to that mastery and, again, that growth mindset. So many of us have had learning experiences that have been detrimental to our self identity, where you've had a school teacher who's beaten you up and mentally beaten you up and told you that you're not good enough and you'll never amount to anything. And certainly school environments are not conducive to helping people to learn, certainly not in our generation. I imagine it's changing and has changed. But if you didn't love maths and science and English, then you didn't engage with school, and therefore learning had like that, the structure of our formal learning education environment then has an impact on, well, I'm no good at learning, I don't take information in, all of that sort of stuff that comes in. So I wonder whether there is that stuff. We don't need to get on the therapy couch, but certainly how we have experienced a learning environment from an early age can have a really big impact.
I think that's huge.
On,
and when you said identity, part of my identity is that I resist learning because it makes me feel stupid, because I can't learn, because I will make mistakes, and then that means I'm not doing it properly. And I feel incompetent, and I don't like people looking at me that way. I want to be seen as somebody better than that. And so it's their identity. It's not that how do I make this person or motivate this person to want to learn. Then it comes to how can I create an environment where we're changing what learning means to that person.
Well, do we have a responsibility as business owners to immediately identify that if learning is something that we want to embody within the organisation, that we have to acknowledge that not everyone is going to come to the table all excited about learning? Do we have to create an environment where that is part of it, or are we just setting it up to attract people who only love learning?
I think
and what do you do if you've got someone in the middle?
Yeah, I think that both have to be happening at the same time. You'll eventually end up with a team of people who love learning, because that's how you're going to start recruiting now that you've identified that this is the thing that you want to do. But for your existing team members, how can we support them? Because the minute we start saying, we're adopting this core value of growth in this organisation, what that means is that we're going to be doing a bunch more learning, team training, bringing in resources, bringing in coaches to help us all get better at the things that we do. And if we need to recognise, or we don't need to, but it's beneficial to the people that have been already loyal to you and working hard for you, that we recognise that it may make some of you feel uncomfortable. So let's talk about that. And then as a group, and maybe this is something that gets facilitated by a coach, as a group, we're calling everything out. Because I remember when I was recently went through all the reasons why people don't delegate with the students in the dental practice management program. And when we've got all, everyone's faces there on the Zoom, sometimes we don't realise something until it gets pointed out and you go, oh, yeah, that's the reason I don't delegate. Oh, and that one too. Oh, and that one too. And so you start to understand yourself more. And so you can start recognizing, the minute we recognise a thing within us that's unconscious, sometimes that's all we need to then go, oh, that makes no sense anymore. I'm going to do it this way now. And so when we've got this group of people, let's all talk about the reasons why we don't like learning. Let's go around the room. Why don't we like learning? Because we feel stupid when we make mistakes. Write that one on the board. Get the list of 20 things or what have you of the reasons why we don't love learning. And then we're going to say, this isn't going to happen here. Mistakes are fine. We're going to get the chance to practice and repeat things until we get better at it. If we're not learning quickly enough or it's too complex, we're going to bring in more resources, more assistance, more training to help us on that journey. We're going to make, one of our visions is in order for us in this organisation to adopt and foster the value of growth, it also means we understand now the environment we need to create and the meaning that we're going to attach to learning in this organisation. So then maybe even the people that are quite averse to learning because of past experiences, they're seeing them quite fresh, going, oh gosh, there is a lot of value to learning because I will get better, I will master things, I'll feel like I'm progressing. I want to have that feeling, and it seems like this is the environment I might be able to get there.
So going back, we've been focusing on learning, but I wonder whether we just take it up to more of a universal idea around change. Can you use the same approach with people or behaviours that are resistant to change? So in one circumstance, you've got someone who's resistant or uncomfortable with learning, but change generally. And this happens a lot. I think I've experienced it certainly when I go in. It happens more when I go into a business new and fresh, and the people who've been there for a long period of time normally don't like the changes that we're going to be putting in place and coming along. So can you take the same approach with change generally as what you've discussed through learning, or do you think that there's another strategy that could be considered?
I think we could use the same strategy. I think let's identify so it's really clear in all our conscious awareness of what the benefits to change are, like we were identifying the benefits of learning. And now let's look at the reasons why many of us feel very uncomfortable with change. Because we really want to, the stuff that's going on in the team member mind is, what's in it for me, but also what could be a threat to me as well. Mm-hmm. And so let's list all that stuff down. Let's get it out of our subconscious, bring it into the conscious mind, put it on a whiteboard, put it on butcher paper. So then now we fully understand where the aversion is, and so we know what kind of environment we need to create in order to address both sides of that. How can we really foster the good stuff and move towards the good stuff while addressing the bad stuff and the stuff that's pulling us away from that goal?
So, Julie, we just had a pause because I needed some time to think through my question. Whether you keep this acknowledgement in or not. There were two, I guess when we're talking about change, there were two things that I was thinking. And one was, how do you create an environment from the get-go? So if you're starting the business or you're going into a new business with a small team, how do you set it up to embody certain philosophies such as change, that we accept change or that we accept learning, And then on the other side, what do you do if you've got an established business and you realize that there's been a culture created that doesn't accept change or doesn't like change? And this will happen with a new manager who might come in, for example, and they're like, wow, this business needs some real change. So what do you do? What do you do at the start when you're setting up, and what do you do in the middle if there's a resistant thing? Have we got a process that you might think through or support change? And I suppose we're just talking change management here, really.
Yeah, and I think when you start off, number one, the constant never-ending improvement journey that each one of us individually are on, openly speak about the fact that the business is on the very same journey. So where do we start as human beings? Where we are right now. Look at where we aspire to be. We think of the steps we need to take to get there and the role each one of us as team members need to play in order to get there. And so embrace the fact that you as a business will not get it right straight away. It will slowly evolve. And by the time you sell the business, you'll be very proud of the culture you've been able to create and foster, because it'll be done with great intention and consistently over the long term, hopefully. And so when you start your business, go, well, this is what the culture is going to be with my level of awareness now. Read books about it, listen to podcasts about it, and then say, this is what we're creating right now. This is our launching pad. But it won't look like this in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, because this part of the business, like every part of the business, like myself and like every person that works here in the entirety of the business life, we're all on a constant and never-ending improvement journey. And so start where you're at right now and just be on with the intention to improve and grow all the time. If you are at a point where you look at around, you're like, gosh, everyone's so resistant to change and nobody wants to learn, this is difficult, then I think then it's a very good idea to draw a line in the sand and say, this is where we've been. And there are those questions that Sandy Roth has, which I love so much. She was my mentor, and she had 5 questions. I added a 6th one on. But bring the team together. Let them know why you're uncomfortable with the way things are right now and where you imagine a more successful version of everything, what that looks like. And bring the team on the journey with you. So one, they don't feel like they've done anything wrong because you've assisted in creating that culture yourself as well. It's never just the team's fault. The leaders of the organisation have allowed things to get to this stage as well. And it's not about even blaming the management of allowing that to get to where things are right now either, because even in a bad relationship, which has got, a dysfunctional relationship, by the time you separate, it's as bad as it's going to get. And so you go, that's it. It's over with. We're done. And people say, why'd you hang around? Why'd you keep it going? Why don't they break up? And it's because they never said yes at day one at 5 years down the track. They never said yes to that journey. They just said yes to the next day, to the next day, to the next day. It's a very incremental decline. And so recognise that as well as leaders of the organisation and say that out loud to your whole team. We never wanted this picture to be the result. We wanted a space where everyone here was able to thrive and be really delighted and have great job satisfaction. That's what we wanted. But we can see now upon reflection how we've allowed the current environment to be created. What we want to do is this. And so asking these following 6 questions can really set the path forward for the whole team. And if you involve the whole team, they'll be more enthusiastic about it. They'll take more responsibility. They'll be far happier to move on down that path, because keep remembering, one of our drivers is autonomy. Don't just think you have to pepper them with 20 things to do, that you must do these things now and expect them to be motivated to do it. And those 6 questions are, where have we been? Because there's every chance that in the past it was fine. It was great. Where are we now? Talk about the characteristics of the team right now and their resistance to learning, growing, and changing. Where do we want to go? You share your vision and have them contribute, share their vision as well. Break open the mind. Imagine this was the best place in the world to work at and you love coming to work every day. What does that look like? How are we going to get there? How are we going to get from here to there? What strategies can we implement? What steps do we need to take? And then we're going to bring it down to personal responsibility and personal expectation and being very clear about that, because sometimes that clarity is not there when we're talking to our team members. What role will each one of us play in getting there? What does my own personal behaviour need to be if this is the journey that we're working towards? Because each one of us separately agreed we all need to do things differently, otherwise we'll just maintain the same culture. But we're trying to get somewhere different, so we need to do different things. And the 6th question that I added in at the end was, and how are we going to make sure we're on track? And so how are we going to, what sort of process are we going to meet every month to double check how we're going? Are we going to have reminders being sent out every morning to remind everybody this is the way we're doing things now, and only concentrate on one element of it at a time? Remember, this week it's all about there's no mistakes, there's no bad mistakes. Only attitudinal mistakes are things we're trying to move away from. But if mistakes are made with good intention of learning and growing, we're going to love those mistakes. And that's what we're doing this week, remember. We're going to survey the team members every couple of months to make sure everyone is feeling the vibe of shift and change to something better. And sometimes it is better to bring a coach in, so then the leaders of the organisation, everyone's with the team members, everyone's on the same peg. You know what I mean? We're all together.
Yeah. I was going to say this is a real challenge, because without wanting to offend any of the leaders are responsible for creating the environment that perhaps there is a resistance to change, or that there are certain team members who are not behaving in the way that is appropriate. But the leaders need to take responsibility that they actually helped to create that problem. So getting an external party in to facilitate some of the discussion can take away resentment that can come about when a leader wants to create change, because also a leader wants to, more often than not, if they've created this environment, they'll want to assert the change. Whereas the way that you're talking, Julie, is a much more collaborative way of operating. And I wonder whether, if you're operating on that basis to start off with, would you have these problems? I don't know. I'm happy to be challenged on that, but definitely getting another person in to support the conversations and support the change can be really helpful, because then they don't project it on the leader as much. They'll project it back on the coach, and that's fine, because the coach, that's what their job is to do, is to accept that people are uncomfortable with this and that we have to work through that. It means that we're not invested. A leader in a business might actually be invested in being right, whereas a coach has no investment in being right. They just want to get the outcome for the business. So definitely getting an external person to come in. As you were talking, Julie, I wrote down, remember, you're going to break some eggs. Going back to our chicken rooster scenario, one of the things that I think leaders need to be prepared for when they are going on a change management process, and when I say change management process, that's just very management consulty speak to say we're going to change something. But when we go on that journey and we commit to the journey, so let's talk about these core values, and we're going to establish our core values. People leave the organization, and often, like, I don't know, I've seen it so many times when I've done values work with organizations, or we put a business strategy in place and we set new standards in the organization, we lose people, they leave. And the business owner will get a little bit concerned about that, or they'll notice someone getting quite a bit antsy about these changes that we're putting in place. That is beautiful. That is the best thing, because what we do want is we want team members who are going to embrace, like the learning side of things, that they embrace this change and they embrace the uncomfortableness of the unknown, but they come on the journey because they're motivated to be with the organization. Those people who become resentful and don't want to change, we want them to leave. We want them to self-select, because only good happens for them and for the organization. But I know that a lot of business owners get really nervous about that. But in order to make a cake, you've got to break some eggs.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, we're talking about getting the right people in the right seats on the right bus. When you change the appearance of the bus to what it was when they jumped on the bus, it may not suit them anymore. And so it is good that when they go off the bus and then somebody else goes, now look at that pretty bus, I'm jumping on that bus. That's exactly the kind of bus I've been looking for. And so that you're absolutely right. That is just part of it. And you are a richer team because of it. Because it is a common thing that unless you stay consistently on board with pushing, I shouldn't say pushing, it seems like it's forced, with encouraging this new culture that you're developing, unless you're on it all the time, those ones that are resistant to it will rear up and they'll start getting their way, and they'll just be a brake and anchor to getting things moving forward.
Absolutely. And that's where putting in how we're going to measure it, your sixth question, is really useful. I did some values work with a client, and we set up a program of rewards and recognition to embed the values. And one of the managers' KPIs, the management team's KPIs, is they actually had to call out values being lived. I think I set a ridiculous number, like each one had to call out at least 5 times a week values being lived. So it actually perpetuated this idea that this is actually really important. And so then other people would call out, hey, this person did this, so we're living the value of that. And it just became a rolling thing. But you've got to set up a system to help people be reminded of what's important. I know that sounds really stupid. Like, hang on, what, you set up a KPI on rewarding people's behavior, of calling out good behavior? It's like, Yes, because how are you going to remember otherwise? How are you going to embed this as an actual change in the organization? And simply in your morning meeting saying, here are our new values is not going to be enough.
And you doing that, you're helping to shift people's bias to what's going well in the organization and positive behavior and responses, rather than the default place where many of us tend to reside, which is looking for things that are wrong that I need to fix.
So we've sort of talked about learning, individual learning a little bit. We've talked about change overall in an organization. What about change of an individual person? So let's say the organization has gone through this change and we do have a hanger-onerer. It's a real word. I haven't made it up. So someone who's very resistant, and we now need to go through a process to support their change. Are we talking about a performance management approach here, Julie? Is it as serious as that? And how can we do that where it's not a formal Fair Work performance management approach?
Yeah, it's an interesting space, because sometimes team members could say, I'm not doing anything different. I've always functioned and behaved this way in my role. I'm fulfilling the responsibilities of my role. I get all of my tasks done. But now you're adding something new into the mix, a new expectation of me, and now I'm being performance reviewed around that, and I might lose my job because I haven't done actually anything wrong.
Well, we're talking about a change in attitude, aren't we?
And so often the things that are making that, often the characteristics that an employee is showing, that despite all of this shift and change, despite the plan, all the things, this person's not coming on board, they may be displaying characteristics that under normal circumstances you would be putting them through a performance review. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that, for example, that we would be requiring to create the environment for embracing learning and growth is to be a great peer support to one another. And if you haven't got that generosity of spirit, and then that's something you go, this is a positive integral part of what we're trying to change and shift here. I feel like that you're not on board with that. Can you tell me what your thoughts are around cheering other team members on? Another element could be that, we are changing the way that we're communicating or responding to each other. And so in the past, mistakes have been a bad thing, but now they're a good thing. In the past, we really haven't been at learning new things, but now we are, and we're all going through those spaces of feeling a bit incompetent at the start until we've got a chance to learn the new thing. You seem to be, from what my perception is, that you're not jumping on board with learning new things. What feelings have you been going through when you're faced with learning new things? What are your thoughts around that? And so I think it's a space where we can help that person down a bit of a self-awareness journey with some pretty simple questions without going into therapy sessions with them, but just reminding them this is really super important for us to move forward, and we need the whole team on board to be able to do it. Do you still feel like, with the changes that we've made, that this is the best place for you, that you are going to be able to thrive here? And, I think it is a difficult conversation, because there is an element of unfairness about it, but I think it's only unfair if you have not given every chance for that person to identify why they're having trouble with it.
They are really beautiful points. I am also looking at an episode number for us. They're beautiful points. I think, Julie, the way that you're able to articulate some potentially difficult conversations is really beautiful, and I think it highlights the value of having someone like yourself come in to support those conversations. There's a model that I share with clients. I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's the FUEL model of coaching. FUEL, F-U-E-L.
I remember You've done that before. Fuel. But you'll have to remind me what the fuel stands for.
Fuel. I will. I once did I was once the voice person for the Carlton Football Club for the membership line.
Really?
So I was the person. Yes, I was.
Goodness gracious. So once they've been tested,
And my boss at the time apparently said that I couldn't say renewal. I kept, because you got membership renewal, and he was like, "You keep saying renewal." Like, renewal. So I have a problem with my mouth.
Now you say fuel.
Fuel. Yes. So fuel. F is frame the conversation. So exactly like what you did before, where you sort of said, I want to have a conversation about what we're doing here. Da, 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 da. The U is for understand the current state. And that is very much asking those beautiful questions that you gave around, do they understand what we're trying to achieve here in the business? Do they understand why the change is important? Do they understand the part that they can play? Understand the current state. Ask the question, I'm sensing some resistance. Can we talk about that? And certainly there's vulnerability required on both parties and a huge amount of trust to have some of those conversations. So there's definitely value in stepping back and as a leader saying, how can I set a container around this conversation, again, framing the conversation so that they're in a really safe place to actually say, I feel like an idiot, that I don't like learning because I feel like an idiot. And so as a leader, you've then got an opportunity to support them. E stands for explore the desired state. So this is that future pace. What does success look like? What are we trying to achieve here? With the person, it's we as leaders often want to assert ourselves. We've got a million things on the go. We're trying to get to an outcome. We just want to say, here's the problem. I want you to implement this solution and leave it there. Whereas this actually, it requires taking a back step and allowing the agency of the other person to explore, do they understand the desired state? What's stopping them from getting to the desired state? How can they help us get to the desired state? What does the desired state even look like? And then the L is lay out a plan for success. And that is, what can they do? What can I do? How can I support them? What does milestones look like? What does go, not go look like in terms of go, you're happily on board, or not go, we have a conversation about what the future holds if you don't like this. So I love the model because it helps, I think, business owners, particularly those who are not the way that you communicate, Julie, who are a little bit more, I just want you to do it.
It's written down on an SOP now. You have to do it. It's written down.
Yeah. just change. Just do it differently. And the episode that I wanted to highlight was about, I will find it. There was something we did an episode, difficult discussions, episode number 16. Goodness me, Julie. Can you believe that was episode number 16 and we're at 44? So episode number 16 is a great one for having difficult discussions. So definitely go and check that one out.
And can I just throw in another thought as well?
No.
The minute I think of, how would you have that conversation with a team member? That's tricky. I always go back to the parent-child frame. So if you imagine that the family dynamic, it's really, the teenagers, or I should say the children that used to get along well, they've grown into teenagers that don't get along well, and everyone's starting to swear a little bit much and speak with disrespect to each other, and it's just got to stop now, right? So the parents say, that's it, it's stopping. Line in the sand, this is how we're behaving moving forward. And you had 3 of your 4 children jump on board with it, and then 1 child didn't. Your inclination as a parent would be trying to discover why. What's going on for you where this is tricky for you? And you wouldn't say, you know what, you can continue acting badly and the rest of us will act good, because that's not how a family is going to function properly. And it's all for the greater good. And it's so the individual members of your family can feel safe and stable and thrive and learn and grow and all the things. And so trying to help this child to understand that for them, if you don't like the way we have said to the other children of the family, this is how we cheer each other on, how would you cheer somebody on? How would you like to be cheered on? You can do this stuff in your own way, but you need to be cheering somebody on. You can do something.
How dysfunctional was your family, Julie? Because all of this is really unfamiliar to me.
It's their problem. I'm very functional. They're the ones that are fault.
I'm just thinking, if you had a dysfunctional family, this might be really unfamiliar, like me. But we're not going to talk about the Shannyn's therapy couch today. So, but anyway,
because sometimes team members may say, I understand the words that you're saying and where you want to take it, but I really still don't understand what it means for me. How do I respond? I'm uncomfortable with telling people what a good job they've done. It's foreign to me. And so maybe it's coming back down to, for you individually, let's talk about how you can live these values in your unique way. And there's probably a lot of owners and managers out there going, oh, crikey, do I need to study psychotherapy to be able to go down this path with all these people? How much time is it going to take and all the rest of it? But we need to, if it's difficult to get a bunch of people consistently behaving in a positive way all the time, because all of our other characteristics come into the fold as well. And then there's challenges, and we respond to the challenges in unhelpful ways. And so there does need to be that consistent intention all the way. And obviously the leaders have to do it. Lead by example. You show them what it looks like to embrace change, to learn new things, to make mistakes and overcome them, and get to know how to do things better.
Julie, I think you've made far more greater points than I have in this podcast. You've really carried us on this one. I only say that because I think you've offered such an amazing frameworks and conversation starters and standards that I think anyone can apply. So if you haven't written notes on this podcast, you probably should go back and listen to Julie. But my wrap, we started by talking about learning, and Julie shared from Dan Pink's book that we are motivated by mastery, purpose, and autonomy. We talked about core values and how they really play as a foundation to support change in an organization. So introducing core values or adjusting core values can really benefit. We talked about change generally, and one of the points that you made, Julie, is what's in it for me and what's a threat, being able to have some of those dialogues. I think the points that you made around having open communication with your team that change is about to happen and involve the team on it. Those 6 questions that you asked, where have we been? Where are we now? What do we want? Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? What are you responsible for? And how are we going to make sure we're on track? 6 brilliant questions. Standards around constant and never-ending improvement. I nearly forgot what the word was. And remember that whenever you create change, you are likely to potentially break some eggs, and that's a good thing. You're on a learning journey, and everything is an opportunity for growth.
And omelets are always yummy.
I'll toast it up next time.
Love it, I love it. Well, thanks, Shannyn. Such a delightful chat, as always.
Always a delightful chat. Obviously, my face does better during our midday chats. But I'm loving the end of day chats because now I get to just enjoy the rest of my evening having.
That's the end of our work now.
Yeah, had an antecedents of my evening to Julie.
Well, you have a beautiful couple of weeks until a beautiful week until we catch up again next time.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, listeners. Take care. We'll speak to you later. Bye.